So thank you for your excellent talk. Um, so Jacob mentioned watching a podcast about aliens. And the culture around possible aliens, I find it very interesting. And I actually wrote a poetry book several years ago about Roswell, the whole Roswell thing. And what I find interesting is the following. Something happens that you don't know what it is. And so you make a narrative about it. And so there's a mountain in China, and I'm forgetting the name. It's in one of our koans, and it's this very famous mountain because there are always these lights, sort of above this mountain. Now we would think, oh, it's aliens, but back in the day, like 1,000 or 1,500 years ago, they decided that that's where Manjushri lived. And those lights were all the, sort of celestial beings coming to hang out with Manjushri. And they still believe that. So this mountain is where Manjushri lives, and it's where the celestial beings hang out with Manjushri, and that's what the lights are, the celestial beings. But of course, if this happened in, say, 1950 on Mount Shasta, people would say, oh, it's the aliens. It's an alien, alien port where they land their ships and, do whatever they do, but we never see them because they're so clever, And so it's really interesting to me, this whole phenomenon of how people create narratives because we just can't stand not knowing something. We just can't stand not knowing what those lights are. And so we create a narrative about it. And it's just really interesting. And reading the testimony, I did a lot of work on the, reading like first-person testimonies of people in Roswell. And what was very interesting about that event is when it first happened, people didn't know what it was, so they decided it was aliens, and they very quickly decided it wasn't aliens, and it sort of died. And then, like 15, 16 years later, the event happened in 47. Oh, a lot more than that. I'm sorry, I can't count. Like 30 or 40 years later in the 90s, but not 50, about 45 years later, a couple of people who were into aliens started interviewing people. And this is way, way after the fact, just way after the fact. And they started interviewing all these people, and these people came up with all these stories, which actually contradicted each other. But they really believed it. They were really sincere. They didn't think they were making anything up. And I actually had a very long lunch with a guy who lives in Missouri who claims that when he was 5 years old, he saw a crashed craft near Roswell at the same time that he was with his cousin and his uncle, and they were looking for rocks because there were all kinds of cool rocks there. And that he saw this crashed craft, and that there was this one alien tending to his companions who all died, and then all of a sudden the army comes in and chases them away, and how he remembered this his whole life. And I have no idea what he saw. I have no idea what he saw, except it probably wasn't a crashed alien craft, because he's considered so far out that the UFO community doesn't want anything to do with him. The people who really do all this, pro-UFO research, who really think that something did land in Roswell, he's so far out that they don't want anything to do with him. So, and he's really sincere. He's a really lovely guy, This is our minds. This is what our minds do. We just make up a story. A friend doesn't notice us in a crowd, and we make up a story about how they're upset with us, or maybe something terrible is happening in their life. We just make up these stories. We're constantly making up stories. It's just really, really interesting to me how our minds function in this way. And we just can't be comfortable with don't know. I don't know what those lights are. I just don't know. We're just not comfortable with that. So we make all this stuff up. We're not comfortable with saying, oh, maybe I should call my friend, find out what's happening. No, we make up something on the spot. We just do that all the time. And just this very simple noticing of don't know. Just, oh, I actually don't know. And then we can open to what actually is going on. And maybe we won't, know what those lights are. But not knowing what those lights are and knowing that we don't know what those lights are is a lot better than convincing ourselves that we know what those lights are when we actually don't know what those lights are. So I just wanted to say that. I just find the whole thing so completely fascinating. And yeah, it's really interesting. And then, of course, I made up my own poems about what it would be like to be this alien. And a sort of friend, another poet who is from, she's Filipino, so she's very familiar with American aggression and colonialism. And she wrote a comment on my book about how it was the colonialist mentality, because I thought I could know what it was to be an alien. So I did it too. It was really interesting. So thank you for your talk. Yeah. Are there any questions? Yes.
Falling under don't know what's next. Do we try to find out what it is and become the known, or we become comfortable of not knowing and then go on?
So don't know is like this deep ocean that you dive into and there's no bottom. So don't know is not, oh, I don't know, and maybe I'll find out. That's not don't know. Don't know is this open mind, this mind that's completely open. So if you've ever seen a baby being born, no, because it came out of you, you didn't see it. No, other people saw it, but you didn't see it. If you see a baby being born, I had a friend who's, I actually helped her. I wasn't exactly a doula, I had no training, but she wanted me with her. And her baby came out and the head came out, and then the rest of the body took some time because the water broke too early. So it wasn't as sort of liquid in there as it should have been. So the head came out, and I was so struck because I'd always heard that babies are born blind. And this kid and my friend had not wanted to know if it was a boy or a girl, so we didn't know whether it was a boy or a girl. And it was interesting how that made my mind spin. Here's a being, and I don't know if it's a boy or a girl. That was really interesting. But anyway, this baby just was like, just taking it in, and letting this universe wash over her. We learned it was a her 5 minutes later. And that's don't know. Or if you startle an animal and they go, that's don't know, this giant, what is this? What is this? And yeah, it resolves. I know that you're shuang and you're sitting there and you're holding the microphone, and yeah, I know that. And you're wearing glasses and stuff like that. I know that, I can see that. But it's also this kind of, this just humility in the best sense, just this real openness. And yet to function, we need stories. I mean, we need stories to function. Like, here's a story. I'm sitting here talking to you, that's a story. If I were an ant, if there were an ant, crawling on the floor, they wouldn't know that story. They would know there's somebody sitting on a chair talking to a bunch of people sitting on the floor. They wouldn't know that. I don't know what they would think was going on, but they certainly wouldn't think that. So yeah, we need stories in order to function, that's fine. But behind, there's this luminous quality of open An open mind, this luminous open mind. That's don't know. Okay? Yeah. It's very powerful. It's very liberating. Yeah, anytime you get really upset by something and say, oh, I don't know. Oh, look at that. I don't know. You know? Right? Doesn't help you with your bad cigar, but yeah. Are there any other questions? Oh yeah, Liz has her hand up, or has the computer hand up. Okay.
So with the don't know, I mean,
Mhm.
your analogy of a big ocean that, you know, there's no bottom, that is not comforting at all. I have this fear of water when I don't touch the bottom.
I do too.
And I don't know where the bottom is. And if I'm reading a novel and I haven't looked at the back to see what's happened and how it ends, and I take my blood pressure is up. There's this anxiety and this fear, and I don't know what's going to happen when my husband dies. I don't know. I don't know how he's going to die. I know he's going to, and maybe I'll die before he does, but he's 10 years older than I am. So chances are he's going to die before I do. And I don't know what's going to happen. And it scares the hell out of me. So this don't know, yes, it's expansive, but it's also incredibly fearful, at least for me.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with the fear that comes with don't know? Because the stories, I do tell stories because I don't know, but they don't actually help. They sometimes make anxiety a hell of a lot worse. So what do you do with the fear of don't know?
Well, first of all, the ocean was a metaphor. It's not the truth. It's just a metaphor. So if you find it frightening, just throw it away, because that's not what don't know is. You know, I find it helpful. If you don't find it helpful, get rid of it, because it's just a metaphor. But when you say, you know, I don't know what's going to happen when my husband dies. I don't know what's going to happen when my husband dies, except I know I'll be really, really unhappy. And I know that things will fall apart in many ways. And the other thing that I know is that there's no way to predict how they will fall apart and what I will do and how I will react. There's no way of knowing that. You know, sometimes I find myself, I mean, everyone, if you have a sweetie that you live with and, you know, they go to the store and maybe they're gone for too long, you know, and you start worrying, what happened to them? You know, were they in an accident? Do they have a heart attack? You know, if you're old enough, you can worry if they have a heart attack. And whenever I find myself doing that, I remind myself of all the times I've done that and it never happened. And what happened is my husband got lymphoma. I never once worried about my husband getting lymphoma until suddenly he's diagnosed with lymphoma and he's almost dead, and now he's fine. You know, he's fine. I mean, he's been in remission for almost 6 years. He had this fantastic treatment. He looks great, you know, but it never occurred to me to worry about lymphoma. That's the thing that almost got him, you know? So I take comfort when I find myself worrying about, did this happen or did that happen, that I have this track record of whatever I'm worried about didn't happen. So whatever's going to happen, I don't know what it is, so might as well not worry about it because I can't imagine what it's going to be. But that's just me, you know. But, you know, what you're talking about, we want to know the future. We want to know, what is it going to be like when my husband dies? I remember as a child, I would walk into a closet and pretend that I was, you know, being executed because I wanted to know what death was like. I mean, I wasn't suicidal or anything. It's just this curiosity. I was a kid, you know. So I'd go in a closet and close the door. I figured that's as close as I could get. You know? But that it didn't help, you know. So I think maybe just recognizing, oh, this is my mind. This is my mind doing this, you know. This is my mind, and maybe don't know is our friend, because it helps us become comfortable. Oh, I really can't know what it's like. I really can't know what it's going to be. And then, then each moment we can maybe be more completely in each moment without trying to anticipate what the other moments are. I just had 3 surgeries in 5 weeks. I had 2 cataract surgeries 2 weeks apart, and then 3 weeks after the second, I had a meniscus surgery. And for both of them, like you have to put in eye drops for after the cataract surgery. So I practiced eye drops. I wanted to be ready. And then, after the meniscus surgery, you have to wrap your knee if you're going to shower. So I experimented before I had the surgery. I experimented with all the, but what actually happened, it's always different. It's always different than we can imagine. Like after the cataract surgery, for each eye, one, when I would look at something, one eye the eye that was operated on would have it appear at an angle. It wasn't like double vision, it was like bizarre, like totally bizarre. They said you might have double vision. They didn't say, instead of seeing Stanley, my husband back there, Stanley, I would see Stanley and I would see Stanley. They didn't tell me that. And I really freaked out the first time. And then the second time I was like, oh, now I know what this is, It's all like that. It's just all like that. Our whole lives are like that. They're not what we think they're going to be. And the more comfortable we can become with that, then the less frightened and the less anxious, and just like, oh yeah, I wasn't expecting this, okay, So, but yeah, you're right. We tend towards anxiety, we tend towards fear, we tend to want to know the future so badly, and we can't. And that can be a place of comfort, that we don't put these expectations on ourselves. It's just, oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, look at that. So I don't know if that helps, but that's how I respond. So thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, please speak up.
I happen to have direct experience of watching my husband die.
Right.
Last week is the next week. It just happened.
Yeah.
So Shannon here is actually a hospice chaplain. Maybe she could show us what she does to actually help people to look at your grief, look at your, when this happened, that my experience was I was pissed off.
Can you say it into the microphone?
Anger. What a cry. He disappeared. He never came to my dream. If he did, there was no face. Okay? So there are things that every single culture has to help people to look at this grief, look at this fear of this grief that happened. So we have charity practice this every single day. Maybe we should do this.
Would you like to say something? You don't have to if you don't want to. I'm trying to get it so people can see Shannon. Why don't you come over here?
One of the things that's lost for most of us in the United States of America is that deep grief and anger needs witness. That most of us human beings, to get to the depth of our feelings that have a righteous place in our experience, needs another human being who is able to be there present, not correcting, fixing, telling, advising anything, just witnessing. So if this community can provide a silent, accepting witness for each other to allow all that is to come through, that would be the most helpful.
Thank you. And I think silent, accepting witness for each other is a very good description of a healthy Sangha. Yeah. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Okay, so it's time for announcements.